My name is Marlene Foster, and at 57, I had a bad habit of cooking like I still had a full house. It was the first real cold snap of December in Maple Grove, a small Ohio town where winter always seemed to arrive overnight. One day you're raking soggy leaves, the next, your breath is puffing in little clouds as you hurry from the car to the front door. That Saturday, the sky was a pale, washed-out blue, the kind that makes bare tree branches look almost black against it. I'd spent the afternoon in my kitchen with the oven on, the whole house warming up and filling with the smell of cinnamon and butter. Old habits die hard. For years, I made 2 pies for every holiday, 1 pumpkin, 1 apple. Back when my kids were still home, they'd pick at them for days, sneaking slivers after school and before bed. My ex-husband, Rick, used to joke that pie was the 5th food group in our house. But now the kids lived in other states, and Rick lived with his new wife across town, and I lived with a golden retriever named Daisy, who was not supposed to have sugar, no matter how much she begged. Still, my hands knew the motions. Flour on the counter, cold butter cut into cubes, the feel of good dough just coming together under my palms. By force of muscle memory, I'd made 2 pies for the church holiday potluck, 1 to take, 1 just in case. Only half of the church pie got eaten, and I'd come home with most of that 1 and the untouched backup, which is how I ended up staring at 2 mostly whole apple pies on my kitchen counter at 9 p.m., the glow from the under-cabinet lights shining on their glossy, cinnamon-sugared tops. "Lord help me," I muttered, hands on my hips. "You and I both know I do not need to eat my way through this much pastry." Daisy wagged her tail hopefully, as if I were talking to her. She thumped it against the cabinet, toenails clicking on the tile. I should probably tell you, I wasn't just thinking about pie. Since my divorce 2 years earlier, holidays had become complicated. My son, Adam, worked crazy shifts as a paramedic in North Carolina and couldn't always make it home. My daughter, Jenna, lived in Denver, juggling a job and grad school. They both did their best to rotate visits, but more and more Thanksgiving and Christmas Eve looked like this: me, my dog, and enough leftovers for a family that no longer lived here. I wasn't angry anymore. The sharp edge of betrayal had dulled into something more like a bruise. Rick and I had grown apart long before he admitted he'd reconnected with an old flame on Facebook. What I felt most days wasn't rage, it was emptiness. The kind you feel when you walk past 3 unused bedrooms on your way to bed. That night, I'd gone to the church potluck partly because it was expected. I ran the sign-up sheets and kept track of who was bringing what, a job I'd somehow acquired after my divorce when people didn't know what else to do with me. "Marlene's so organized," they said. "She loves lists." I did love lists. Lists made sense in a life where not much else did anymore. The potluck had been fine. Tables pushed together in the fellowship hall, kids running between the legs of folding chairs, crockpots lining the back wall like soldiers, chili, mac and cheese, green beans with bacon. I'd smiled, made small talk, asked about other people's kids and travel plans. Then I'd driven home on quiet neighborhood streets lined with twinkling lights, each lit window a little square of someone else's togetherness. Now, in my small, tidy kitchen, the silence pressed in. I opened the dishwasher just to have a sound, then closed it again. My original plan had been to wrap the pies, stick them in the fridge, and gradually do what middle-aged women do best: pick. A slice with coffee in the morning, a sliver after work, a forkful standing over the sink. But for once, I paused. I thought about my neighbor across the street, Mrs. Langley. Her first name was Irene, but I'd never called her that. been Mrs. Langley since I moved into the cul-de-sac 23 years ago, a widow even then. Her husband had died of a heart attack when she was in her late 40s, and she'd never remarried. I used to see her and my kids on the sidewalk together. She'd hand them popsicles in the summer, compliment their Halloween costumes in October. As the years went by, her walks got slower. I'd noticed her porch lights came on later and went off earlier, like she was conserving energy in every way. She baked for us so many times when the kids were little, banana bread. When Adam had the flu, sugar cookies shaped like stars. The year Jenna broke her wrist and couldn't go ice skating. I realized I hadn't taken her anything in well. I couldn't remember when. I glanced at the clock. 9:07. Was that too late to knock? Probably. But the idea of her sitting over there alone gnawed at me. I knew she had one son in Florida who called occasionally, and a niece somewhere out west, but as far as I could tell, no one local dropped by much. I packed one of the pies into a container with a snap-on lid, then thought better of it and grabbed my nicer glass pie dish. If I was going to show up on someone's porch at 9 at night, I wanted it to feel like a real gesture, not like I was offloading leftovers. Stay, I told Daisy, who looked offended but sat down by the door anyway. I shrugged on my puffer vest, tucked my hands into my sleeves, and stepped out into the cold. The air hit me like a sheet of ice, crisp and clean. My breath came out in little puffs. Across the cul-de-sac, Mrs. Langley's porch light was on, a warm yellow square on the front concrete. No other house had their blinds open. It felt like just the two of us against the dark. Halfway across the street, I almost turned back. What if she was already in bed? What if she thought I was being nosy? What if this was weird? But the memory of all the times she'd quietly cared for us nudged me forward. I balanced the pie carefully in one hand and climbed her front steps. Her wreath, fake pine, red bow, a little dusty, brushed my shoulder as I pressed the doorbell. For a long moment, nothing happened. I heard the faint buzz of the bell inside, then the shuffle of feet. A porch light click, a chain sliding. Door opened a crack, and one wary blue eye peered out. "Marlene," she said, surprised. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. "Hi, Mrs. Langley," I said, suddenly aware of how ridiculous I might look, middle-aged woman clutching a pie in the dark. I made too much tonight. I brought you some." I held the dish up like an offering. She blinked, then opened the door wider. She wore a faded pink bathrobe, her gray hair pulled back in a loose bun. Behind her, the TV flickered quietly, casting a bluish light on a clean but cluttered living room. "Goodness," she said. "Come out of that cold." I shook my head. "I don't want to bother you. I just wanted to drop this off." "Nonsense," she said, voice firming. "Come in for a minute. You'll freeze out there with that vest and no hat." I hesitated just long enough for her to step aside, and then I found myself inside, warmth closing around me like a blanket. Her house smelled like lavender and something savory, maybe the remnants of dinner. Family photos lined the walls. A younger Mrs. Langley with a tall man in a suit, a curly-haired boy at various ages, a snapshot of what looked like a church picnic from the 80s. "You didn't have to do this," she said, as I set the pie on her small kitchen table, which was neatly set with a single plate and fork. "But I'm not going to pretend I'm not glad you did." "I know it's late," I apologized. The potluck at church ran long, and then I got home and realized there's no way I should be left alone with two pies. She chuckled, the sound warming the room. "Sit down a minute," she said. "I was just having some tea. You can keep me company while I slice this." It felt rude to refuse. I slid into a chair. She moved slowly, but with purpose, fetching 2 plates, 2 forks, and her prettiest floral teacups from a cabinet. "I saw your car gone earlier," she said as she cut generous slices. Church thing, holiday potluck, I said. You know how it is. Crockpots as far as the eye can see, she smiled. I remember those days. She slid a plate toward me. Now it's just me and Wheel of Fortune most nights. We both laughed, but there was a quiet truth under her words that landed somewhere deep in my chest. We ate warm pie in comfortable silence for a minute. The crust was flaky, the apples soft without being mushy. She closed her eyes briefly after her first bite. Your crust is better than mine ever was, she said. Don't tell my bridge club I said that. They still brag on my cherry pie from '92. I'll keep your secret, I said. After a moment, she set her fork down and looked at me more closely. So, she said gently, how are you doing, really? Holidays can be hard when the nest gets light. For a second, I considered giving the usual answer, busy, fine, can't complain. But something about her kitchen, the old clock ticking on the wall, the fact that we were two women alone on a Saturday night sharing pie, loosened my honesty. It's quieter, I said. The kids have their own lives now, which is good. That's what we want for them, right? But sometimes it feels like life went from too loud to too quiet overnight. I'm still figuring out what to do with the echo. She nodded slowly, eyes kind. I remember that feeling, she said. After Harold died and my Kevin moved to Florida, it was like someone turned the volume down on my whole world. It took me a long time to realize I could turn it back up in different ways. How did you do it? I asked, genuinely curious. She smiled faintly. One small thing at a time. Inviting someone for coffee, joining a book club, saying yes when the lady down the block asked if I'd watch her kids for an hour. You'd be surprised how much changes just because you knock on one door. Her words landed with a little weight. I glanced at the pie between us, at her extra fork set out like she half hoped someone might show up. I almost didn't come over, I admitted. I thought it might be weird, bringing you leftovers out of the blue. She shook her head. Let me tell you something, Marlene, she said. When you live alone, nothing kind is ever weird. People think they're intruding, but most of the time, they're saving you from another night of your own company. We talked a little longer about the church choir, about the neighbor who always left his trash cans out a day too long, about the weather. After half an hour, I stood up to go. Thank you for letting me barge in, I said. Thank you for remembering I'm here, she replied. The walk back to my house felt shorter. The cold didn't bite as much. Daisy wagged herself in circles when I opened the door, then sniffed my hands suspiciously, as if she could smell betrayal in the form of crust crumbs. At night, as I brushed my teeth, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Same soft lines around my eyes, same streak of gray at my temple. But my face looked a little less sagged. I realized I felt lighter, and not just because a quarter of the pie had moved across the street. The next morning in church, I mentioned Mrs. Langley to my friend Patris, who sat 2 pews up. She was a nurse, early 50s, always juggling weird shifts and teenage drama. I took her some pie last night, I said. We ended up talking. She said she doesn't get many visitors. Patris sighed. I keep meaning to check on Mr. Donnelly 2 streets over, she said. His wife passed last year, and I see him at the mailbox, but that's about it. We all wave, but nobody really does anything. I hesitated, then said, you know, there was so much food left over from the potluck. We'll all be eating ham and casseroles for a week. What if we shared? Like, take some to folks, she asked. Yeah, I said slowly, the idea taking shape as I spoke. We could pack up extra plates and bring them to people on our street who might be alone. Just a few, just so they know someone's thinking of them. Patris tilted her head. Holiday leftovers brigade, she said, half teasing. I kind of love that, I laughed, but the phrase stuck in my head. That afternoon, back in my kitchen, I pulled out the containers from my fridge, the ham, the scalloped potatoes, the green beans, the rolls. I made 3 plates, one for Mrs. Langley, one for Mr. Donnelly 2 streets over, and one for a single mom down the block whose car was always gone at odd hours, like she was working every shift she could get. I wrapped the plates in foil and labeled them with sticky notes. Daisy watched, tail thumping, as I lined them up on the counter. I didn't know it then, but those 3 plates were the start of something. At the time, it just felt like trying not to waste good food, like not wanting to eat alone when I didn't have to. But looking back, that was the night I stopped thinking of my leftovers as a reminder of who was gone, and started seeing them as a way to connect with who was still here. I had no idea that one pie would be the first link in a chain that would stretch across our entire neighborhood, then our town, and eventually farther than I ever imagined. The first time I carried those 3 plates out of my kitchen, I told myself it was a one-time thing. I wrapped each paper plate in foil, wrote the names in my neat, teacher-like handwriting, Mrs. Langley, Mr. Donnelly, for you on the one for the single mom whose name I still didn't know, and set them in a reusable grocery bag so they wouldn't slide around. Daisy watched me like I was committing a crime by leaving the house with food and not sharing. Guard the fort, I said, clipping her baby gate up. And no counter surfing. Outside, the Sunday afternoon light was thin and pale, the kind of winter sun that looks warmer than it feels. Maple Grove was quiet. Most people were either napping off the potluck or planted in front of football. Christmas wreaths hung on almost every door, some with ribbons starting to fray, some with fresh greenery that still smelled like pine if you got close enough. I started with Mrs. Langley's house because that felt the easiest. The previous night had broken the ice. She opened the door faster this time, like she'd been expecting someone. When she saw the plate, her face brightened. "Round 2, she asked. "Round 2, I said. "Ham, green beans, and a roll. I promise I did not cook all of this myself." She laughed, took the plate, and patted my arm. "You're going to make me spoiled," she said. "Thank you, dear." Next, I drove 2 streets over to the small ranch house where Mr. Donnelly lived. I didn't know him well. I knew he'd lost his wife last year after a long illness. Sometimes I saw him shuffling to his mailbox, wearing the same brown sweatshirt no matter the weather. I parked at the curb and walked up, suddenly nervous. What if he thought I was pitying him? What if he didn't open the door at all? But when I rang the bell, I heard the muffled sound of a TV, a pause, and then slow footsteps. The door opened a few inches. He peered out, squinting. "Yes. Hi, Mr. Donnelly," I said. "I'm Marlene from over on Willow Court. We haven't really met, but I live nearby. Our church had a big holiday potluck, and there was a ton of food. I wondered if you might like some leftovers so they don't go to waste." His gaze dropped to the plate. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he opened the door wider. His living room was dim, lit only by the TV showing a football game. "You brought that for me?" he asked, like he wasn't quite sure he'd heard right. "Yes," I said simply. "If you'd like it. If not, I can take it somewhere else. No hard feelings." He swallowed. His eyes looked suspiciously wet. No, he said quickly. "I'll take it. I was just going to heat up a can of soup. This looks a whole lot better than soup." I smiled. "Then it's yours. Happy late potluck." He chuckled, a rusty sound. "Happy late potluck," he echoed. "Thank you, Miss Marlene." On the way back to my car, my chest felt tight in that way that is quite sadness, and isn't quite joy, more like your heart, stretching to make room for something new. The third plate was for the single mom down the block. I knew her by sight, early 30s, dark hair usually pulled back in a bun, uniform polo shirt with some chain logo on it. Her little boy, maybe 6 or 7, would sometimes ride his bike in circles on the sidewalk, while she sat on the front steps scrolling her phone, looking exhausted. Her silver sedan was in the driveway, hood dusted with a thin layer of road salt. A small fake tree blinked in the front window, lights slightly uneven. I walked up and rang the bell, rehearsing what I'd say so I didn't sound like I thought she couldn't feed herself. She opened the door halfway, hair in a messy bun, leggings and an oversized sweatshirt, socks, but no shoes. The little boy's face peeked out from behind her hip. "Hi," I said, suddenly aware I'd never actually introduced myself. "I'm Marlene. I live over on the corner with the golden retriever who barks too much." Recognition flickered. "Oh, yeah, I know Daisy," she said, a tiny smile tugging at one corner of her mouth. "Sorry if she drives you crazy," I said. "Listen, my church had a big holiday potluck, and we ended up with way more food than anyone should have in their fridge. I made up some extra plates, and I wondered if you and your little guy might want one." I held out the plate, careful not to push it at her. She looked at it, then at me. I saw the moment she wavered between pride and relief. "That's really nice," she said slowly. "You don't have to." "I know," I said gently. "I wanted to, and you'd be doing me a favor, honestly. It's too much for one person." The little boy tugged her sleeve. "Is that ham?" he asked, eyes wide. "Yes, sir, it is," I said, "and some very fancy church lady potatoes." He grinned. "That did it." "Okay," she said. "Thank you. I'm Erin, by the way. This is Mason." "Nice to officially meet you both," I said. "If you ever need someone to keep an eye on him for half an hour, I'm usually home. I've raised two. I can handle bike tricks." She huffed a small laugh. "Careful," she said. "I might take you up on that." Back at home, I put my now mostly empty fridge containers back on the shelves. They looked oddly satisfying used, not wasted. I didn't realize Daisy had followed me into the kitchen until she nudged my leg with her nose. I looked down. She sat with her favorite stuffed duck between her paws, tail wagging expectantly. "You want to share too, huh?" I said. Over the next week, my little sharing experiment turned into something more, almost without my noticing. At the grocery store, I ran into Patris in the produce section. She was loading sweet potatoes into a bag, her work badge still clipped to her scrubs. "You started something," she said. "I did?" I asked, startled. She nodded. "I took leftover chili to Mr. Donnelly like you mentioned. Then I texted a couple of women from church about it, and now apparently there's a group chat." "A group chat," she smirked. "Holiday Leftovers Brigade. They're talking about making up plates after Christmas dinner and coordinating who takes what where. Someone suggested the phrase, 'No one eats alone if we can help it.'" I blinked, absorbing that. "From one pie," I said. "From one pie," she agreed. Never know which little thing is going to catch. The group chat quickly grew beyond just church ladies. Patris added a coworker who lived across town and had been worrying about an elderly neighbor. Someone's sister joined from the next neighborhood over. A retired teacher added 3 other widows from her cul-de-sac. People started sharing stories and ideas, dropped off turkey and mashed potatoes to my across-the-hall neighbor. She cried, and then insisted on giving me half a pumpkin pie in return. Made up 3 plates for the older couple down the street and the college kid who rents the basement apartment next door. He said it was the first real meal he'd had all week. Left a note with a plate on a single dad's porch. No strings, no judgment, just leftovers. He texted me later to say thank you, and that his boys were thrilled. Most of us weren't doing anything heroic. We were just packing up a little extra and walking a few more steps. But the more we did it, the more it felt like something. A quiet, informal network of women with foil-wrapped kindness and too many Tupperware lids. Around mid-December, someone in the group suggested we get together in person. Not a big thing, the text said. Just a night where we all bring whatever leftovers we have, put them on one long table, and invite whoever wants to come, neighbors, folks we've given plates to, whoever. We can call it the leftover supper. Idea made my stomach flip. I liked the comfort of my small gestures. A big gathering felt risky. What if no one came? What if they came and it was awkward? But every time I started to type, maybe we should wait until next year, another part of me remembered how Mrs. Langley's face lit up when I'd knocked, how Mr. Donnelly's voice had caught when he realized the plate was for him. So I typed, "I'll host." I stared at the message for a second, then hit send before I could overthink it. Patris responded with 3 clap emojis, and of course you will. You have the biggest dining table. My dining table wasn't that big. It was an old oak table, Rick, and I had bought secondhand when the kids were small, scarred with years of homework, craft projects, and family dinners. It seated 8 if you used the leaf, and didn't mind bumping elbows. But I did have a decent-sized living room and a heart that apparently was starting to crave more noise. We picked the Sunday after Christmas early evening, so people wouldn't feel like they had to dress up. The plan was simple. Bring one leftover dish. Bring one person if you can, someone new, someone who might be alone, and bring your own plate and fork if you like, so we wouldn't drown in dishes. No RSVPs, no pressure, just show up. The week leading up to it, I vacillated between excitement and panic. Monday, I dug my extra folding chairs out of the garage and wiped off the spiderwebs. On Tuesday, I stood in my living room trying to figure out where to rearrange furniture so we could fit a long buffet table. On Wednesday, I picked up extra napkins and disposable plates, just in case. On Thursday, I considered canceling. "This is silly," I told Daisy as I straightened throw pillows that no one but me ever saw. People have their own families, their own plans. Nobody's going to want to bring their old green bean casserole to my house. She yawned, thoroughly unconcerned. At church that Sunday morning, Patris squeezed my shoulder. "Nervous?" she asked. "Terrified," I confessed. She grinned. "Good. That means it matters. I've got a crock-pot of chili and 2 teenage boys who eat like wolves. We'll be there. If it's just us, we'll still have a good time." By late afternoon, my house was as ready as it was going to get. I'd pushed the couch back against the wall, turned my coffee table into a drink station, and set up my dining table as the main food spread. I'd even dug out a string of white Christmas lights to drape around the kitchen entryway, hoping they'd make everything feel a little more magical and a little less church basement. At 5:58 p.m., my house was quiet. Too quiet. I checked the time again, as if the microwave clock might have mercy and jump ahead. 5:59. "Maybe no one's coming," I said to Daisy, who sat at the front window like a furry sentinel. Maybe this was a dumb idea. Maybe I should just call it off and eat my own lasagna. She wagged her tail, nose pressed to the glass. At exactly 6:02, a car door slammed. Then another. I watched as Patris's SUV pulled up, followed by a smaller sedan I didn't recognize. My heart started to pound. Opened the front door just as Patris walked up the steps, cheeks pink from the cold, a crock-pot in her hands, and her teenage son behind her carrying a stack of bowls. "We brought reinforcements," she said, nodding back toward the street. "This is my neighbor, June." I told her there'd be real food and real people. She was sold. June, a woman in her late 60s with a colorful scarf and kind eyes, smiled shyly and lifted a foil-covered pan. "Scalloped potatoes," she said, "from Christmas dinner." Couldn't bear to throw them out. I ushered them in, and within minutes more cars arrived. Aaron came with Mason, clutching a container of cornbread. "I worked a double yesterday," she said. "This is all I've got. but he wouldn't let me skip it. Mason held up the cornbread like a trophy. "I helped mix it," he announced. Mrs. Langley came, arm hooked through Mr. Donnelly's, each carrying a dish. "I told him he couldn't hide at home," she said. "He brought his wife's famous cranberry salad recipe." I supervised. A young couple from down the street arrived with store-bought rolls, looking apologetic. "We don't really cook," the husband admitted, "but we wanted to come." "Rolls are essential," I said. "Trust me, you're already heroes." Before I knew it, my dining table was covered. Ham, turkey, mac and cheese, roasted vegetables, pies, cookies, casseroles of every imaginable combination. The air filled with overlapping smells: cheese, cinnamon, garlic, coffee. The murmur of voices grew into a low, pleasant roar. We didn't have a formal prayer or speech. People just started serving each other. "Here, try some of this," someone said, passing a spoon across the table. "Who made these sweet potatoes?" Another voice called. "They taste like my Grandma S." In my living room, Mrs. Langley and Aaron ended up side by side on the couch, swapping stories about raising kids on a tight budget decades apart. In the corner, Mason and the teenage boys played an improvised game of indoor catch with a balled-up napkin, laughing too loud and shushing each other when the cranberry salad almost tipped. Mr. Donnelly and June compared notes about which local hardware store had the best service. Patris held court at the drink station, pouring coffee and teasing people into staying for just one more cookie. At one point, I stepped back into the hallway to catch my breath and take it all in. From there, I could see the whole scene. My once quiet house alive with conversation, plates piled high, strangers leaning in to listen like they'd known each other for years. I felt my throat tighten. "This is a lot," I said softly. Patris appeared at my elbow, following my gaze. "It's good," she said. "It's what we were missing and didn't even know." "It's just leftovers," I said, wiping at the corner of my eye before anyone noticed. "It's not just anything," she replied. "It's people choosing to show up. You gave them a place to do it." Later that night, after everyone had gone and the house had settled into that peculiar post-gathering quiet, I sank onto the couch with Daisy, who finally got a few bites of ham for her patience. My feet ached. My sink was full. Every surface in my kitchen seemed sticky, but my heart felt full. The echo I'd been living with for the past 2 years had been replaced, at least for the night, with the memory of overlapping voices and clinking forks. As I scrolled through my phone before bed, new messages popped up in the group chat. "Thank you, Marlene. Tonight was exactly what I needed. My neighbor hasn't been out much since her surgery. She said she forgot what it felt like to sit at a big, noisy table. Can we do this again? Maybe not just at the holidays." I stared at that last one. We do this again. I thought about all the empty Sunday evenings ahead, the ones I usually spent half watching TV and half arguing with myself about going to bed early. I thought about Mr. Donnelly's face when June invited him to join her, and Mrs. Langley for cards next week. I thought about the way Aaron had relaxed for the first time all month, cheeks flushed, laughing at something Patris's son said. My fingers moved almost on their own. "Yes," I typed. "Let's do this again. Maybe once a month. We can rotate houses if people want, but mine is always open." As I hit send, I didn't feel like a woman passing out leftovers. I felt like a woman passing around a new habit. I had no idea that our little leftovers supper would soon spill beyond my living room, that a local reporter would show up, that a small town mayor would cut a ribbon on something called Maple Grove Community Table, or that I would find myself speaking at the library about how one pie to a lonely widow started a town-wide tradition. At the time, it was simpler. It It was just me, a sink full of dishes, a golden retriever snoring at my feet, and the soft glow of string lights still on over the dining room. Somewhere across the street, Mrs. Langley's porch light clicked off. In my mind's eye, I could see her putting plastic wrap over a leftover slice of pie, humming to herself. I climbed into bed bone tired, but peaceful, already wondering what I might make for next month's supper. Our monthly leftovers suppers settled into a rhythm, the way good things often do. January's was small, snow lining the streets, boots piled by my front door in damp, mismatched heaps. February's landed on the same weekend as the big game, so we leaned into it. Someone brought wings, someone else brought chili, and Mr. Donnelly wore his lucky, ancient brown sweatshirt. By March, we no longer needed to remind people. The questions started arriving on their own. What time on Sunday? Can I bring my neighbor this time? Is it okay if I don't have leftovers and just make something? I don't want to show up empty-handed. The answer was always yes. Bring what you can. Bring who you can. Or just bring yourself. We stopped calling it leftover supper out loud and started calling it the community table, mostly because that's how it felt. Not just scraps from our own meals, but the middle of something we were building together. One evening in early spring, as we stacked plates and wiped down the table after another full, noisy night, Petra said, "You know they're talking about us at the hospital, right?" "About my lasagna?" I asked, amused. "About this," she said, gesturing around the house. "About what you started. There's a nurse on my floor who lives over by Maple Ridge. She said her block wants to try their own version." I blinked. Really, she said. "Word gets around. People are lonely, Marlene. They're hungry for this kind of thing." I thought about that word, lonely. It had wrapped itself around my life like a vine for the last few years, climbing over everything. The idea that something we were doing on a little dead-end street could loosen its grip, even a bit, felt big. Still, in my mind, it was just our thing. Our neighborhood's quiet rebellion against empty Sundays and 2 full fridges. I didn't see the bigger picture until the reporter called. It was late October by then. Leaves had started to turn, painting Maple Grove in red and gold. We'd been doing the community table for nearly 10 months. We'd rotated houses twice when I needed a break, but somehow people kept referring to it as Marlene's supper, which made me both proud and slightly uncomfortable. That Tuesday, I came home from work, my part-time job at the local elementary school cafeteria, serving pizza rectangles and reminding first graders that ketchup was not a vegetable, to a blinking red light on my answering machine. Yes, I still had an answering machine. "Don't judge me." I pressed play. "Hi, Miss Foster," a woman's voice said, bright but professional. "This is Kelly from the Maple Grove Gazette. I've heard about your monthly neighborhood potlucks that started with sharing holiday leftovers, and I'd love to talk with you for a feature we're doing about community connection. If you're willing, please call me back at..." I hit the button to replay it, just to make sure I'd heard right. A feature about us. My first instinct was to say no, to keep it small, keep it safe. But then I thought about how many times I'd wished someone else would go first, ask for help, start something, raise their hand. Maybe this was my turn to be that someone else. I called her back. We met at the local coffee shop the following Saturday. Kelly was in her early 30s, with a notebook, a voice recorder, and a way of listening that made me forget the recorder was even there. I told her the whole story, from the extra pies on my counter, to Mrs. Langley's kitchen table, to the first 3 plates, to the night my living room overflowed with strangers and neighbors passing rolls down the line. She asked about my divorce, about the quiet house, about how it felt to remake my life at 57. It wasn't some grand plan, I said. I was just trying not to waste good food and not spend another night pretending the TV was company. The rest sort of happened, she smiled. That's the kind of story people need to hear, she said. Not the big, flashy things. The small, doable ones. The article ran the week before Thanksgiving. Headline read, "From leftovers to lifelines. One woman's supper brings a town to the table." My picture taken in my kitchen, apron on, holding a casserole, felt surreal on the front of the local section. The story was kind, highlighting not just me, but everyone who'd come. Patris, Aaron, Mrs. Langley, and Mr. Donnelly, the teenage boys who'd started volunteering to help older neighbors carry dishes in and out of cars. Kelly quoted Aaron saying, "As a single mom working odd shifts, this is the one night a month I know I'll sit down at a table with grown-ups and not feel like I'm intruding." She quoted Mr. Donnelly, "I thought my social life was the TV and the mailman. Turns out, I had neighbors who were just waiting for someone to invite them over." She even quoted me, more than I was comfortable with. "You don't have to fix loneliness for the whole world. You can't. But you can put another plate on your table and see what happens." The Gazette has a small circulation, but Maple Grove is the kind of town where everyone seems to read it anyway. At the grocery store, an older cashier waved my paper at me. "Look at our celebrity," she joked. At church, people clapped my shoulder, saying, "Saw the article. Beautiful, Marlene." Even the librarian at the front desk grinned and said, "We're thinking about doing our own version, maybe a story and supper night. You've inspired us." With the attention came something else, more people wanting in. The group chat started popping off with messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Friends of friends, people from across town. One woman wrote, "We live alone in an apartment complex. Do you think something like this could work here?" I wrote back, "Absolutely. Start with one meal, one building, one hallway." A few weeks later, someone shared a photo in the chat. A long folding table set up in what looked like an apartment common room. Dishes lined up, people sitting shoulder to shoulder, plates in hand. The caption read, "Maple Grove Community Table, Maple Ridge Apartments Edition." Then another. A subdivision on the other side of town had turned their cul-de-sac into an outdoor potluck. Long tables running down the middle of the street, kids weaving between chairs on scooters. It was like watching a stone skip across a lake, each touch point sending out its own little ripple. Our December supper that year fell just a few days before Christmas. The Gazette article had suggested that anyone interested in seeing the community table in action could attend that one, as long as they brought a dish or a dozen rolls. I'd agreed, but as the date approached, my anxiety kicked into high gear. What if 50 people show up and we run out of food? I fretted. What if 5 people show up and it's awkward? What if this whole thing has been blown out of proportion and it's really just us and our casseroles? Patris, bless her, listened to every spiraling thought. "Here's what I know," she said finally, stirring sugar into her coffee at my kitchen island. "Even if only 10 people show up, that's 10 people who won't eat alone. And if 50 come, we'll stretch it like we always do. We're church ladies, remember. Multiplying food is our spiritual gift." We laughed, tension easing. On the night of the December supper, I stood on my front porch and watched cars line the street all the way down to the stop sign. I took a deep breath and opened the door. People came in waves. Some were regulars, neighbors who now had their seats at my table, kids who knew exactly where we kept the board games. Others were new faces I'd never seen, carrying crockpots and store-bought pies, cheeks flushed from the cold, and maybe from nerves. The living room filled fast. The dining table groaned under the weight of dishes. The kitchen counters disappeared under foil-wrapped pans. People overflowed onto the couch, the armchairs, even the floor with plates in their laps. It was chaotic. It was imperfect. It was beautiful. At one point, I squeezed past a cluster of people in the hallway and overheard a conversation between two women who had just met. One was in her late 40s, still in her work scrubs. The other was closer to my age, wearing a Christmas sweater with a glittery snowman. "I haven't sat at a big holiday table since my divorce," the younger one said. "I didn't realize how much I missed this." "Me neither," the older one replied. "Mine was 5 years ago. I thought I'd gotten used to the quiet. Turns out, I was just numb." I didn't interrupt, but their words settled into my chest. Later in the evening, as people were going back for seconds, Patris clinked her spoon against her mug. The chatter dimmed. "Can I say something?" she asked, glancing at me for permission. "Go ahead," I said, heart pounding. She cleared her throat. "I just wanted to take a second to acknowledge what's happening here," she said, voice steady. "We started as a few women trying not to waste leftovers. Now look around." Heads turned, eyes following her gesture over the crowded table, the mismatched chairs, the kids sneaking another cookie. "We're not a nonprofit," she continued. "We're not a program. We're just neighbors who decided that nobody should have to eat alone if we can help it. And that sounds small, but I work in healthcare. I see what loneliness does to people. This," she swept her hand across the room, "this is medicine too." There was a murmur of agreement, some nods, a few sniffles discreetly dabbed away with napkins. I felt a lump grow in my throat. "This wouldn't be here if Marlene hadn't knocked on one door with one pie," she added, turning toward me. "So, thank you." A round of gentle applause rose up, not wild or showy, but warm. I felt my cheeks burn. "I didn't do this alone," I said quickly. "You all did. I just had too much dessert." Laughter rippled through the room, lightening the moment. After everyone had gone, I sat at the table with Patris and a few stragglers, nursing cups of tea while we waited for the dishwasher to finish its first overloaded cycle. "What if we made it official?" Patris said suddenly. "Official how?" I asked. "Not in a complicated way," she said. "No bylaws or boards or anything. Just give it a name, maybe a simple flyer, so people know what it is and how to start their own." The article was a good start, but people might need a little more direction. "Like a starter kit?" I asked, half teasing. "Exactly," she said. "The Karma's Leftovers Kit. Step 1, make too much food. Step 2, look around." We all laughed, but the idea took root. Over the next few months, we put together a one-page guide we called Community Table, How to Start with What You Have. It wasn't fancy, just a simple PDF we could email or print at the library. It had tips like, start with one meal, not a big event. Invite a few neighbors personally. Knocking on doors works better than social media. Keep it potluck style and imperfect. Focus on people feeling welcome, not on how the food looks. Ask someone to help you. Doing it alone leads to burnout. And at the bottom in bold, you don't need permission or a program to feed each other. You just need a table and a little courage. The Gazette did a follow-up piece mentioning the guide, and someone shared it on the town's Facebook group. From there, it spread quietly. I started getting emails from people in nearby towns. "We tried your community table idea with 5 households, and it was wonderful." Or "Our apartment complex hosted one in the lobby, and folks are already asking when the next one is." One email stood out. A woman in her early 60s wrote, "I read about your supper in the Gazette while I was eating a frozen dinner alone. I cried over my mashed potatoes, and I printed your guide, walked across the hall, knocked on my neighbors' doors and said, 'I'm tired of eating alone. Would you come over if I made spaghetti?' 4 people came. We've done it every month since. Thank you for giving me a script to be brave with. I sat at my kitchen table, that email glowing on my laptop screen, and cried too. But these were good tears. Cleansing tears. A year and a half after the first pie, the mayor's office reached out. It'd seen the Gazette stories, noticed how many small community tables had popped up, and wanted to host a town-wide version, an outdoor, block-long table in the downtown park, open to everyone. We're calling it Maple Grove's longest table, the coordinator said on the phone. We'd love for you to say a few words at the beginning, since this all started in your kitchen. I almost dropped the phone. Me, I squeaked. In front of a crowd. You and whoever else you'd like, she said kindly. We'll have a few other speakers too. You won't be alone. That last sentence did it. The day of the longest table, the park was transformed. Volunteers had set up row after row of folding tables, end to end, covered in simple white paper tablecloths. String lights hung from temporary poles, ready to glow once the sun dipped. Local restaurants had donated big trays of food. People were encouraged to bring a dish, as well, potluck style. A small stage with a microphone and 2 speakers faced the tables. I arrived early with a pan of my now famous apple pie, Patris beside me with a crock pot of chili. We set our dishes down among dozens of others, then stepped back to watch people arrive. Families, couples, singles, teens in hoodies, older folks with canes, everyone drifted in, some hesitantly, some with obvious excitement. The sound of voices layered over the distant hum of traffic and the rustle of leaves. When it was time to speak, my hands shook as I held the microphone. Patris stood just off to the side, nodding encouragement. I looked out over the sea of faces, some familiar, many not. Tables stretched farther than I could easily see, like a physical representation of all the nights we'd spent crammed around my oak table, multiplied. I'm not a public speaker, I began, earning a few chuckles. I'm a woman who made too much pie. More laughter, softer this time. The tension in my shoulders eased. A couple of years ago, I continued, I was 57, divorced, with grown kids in other states, and a house that felt way too quiet. After a church potluck, I found myself with more food than I could eat in a month. Instead of wrapping it up and pretending I'd be good and throw it out in a week, I knocked on my neighbor's door. I told the story as simply as I could about Mrs. Langley, about Mr. Donnelly, about Aaron and Mason, about the first crowded night at my house, about the group chat, the article, the guide. I didn't set out to start a movement, I said. I set out to not feel so alone. I didn't know that one late-night pie delivery would become this. I gestured at the tables. This long, beautiful line of people choosing to sit together instead of separately. I paused, feeling my voice waver. If there's one thing I've learned, I said, it's that you don't have to fix loneliness in the whole world. You can't. But you can put one more chair at your table. You can knock on one door. You can share one plate. And sometimes, that's enough to start something you never imagined. A breeze lifted the edges of the tablecloths as I stepped back. People clapped, not a roaring ovation, but warm, sustained, real. I handed the microphone to the mayor, who said a few words about community and gratitude, and then invited everyone to take a seat and meet somebody you don't know yet. I sat between Mr. Donnelly and a woman I'd never met before, a retired mail carrier who lived on the opposite side of town. Across from me, Aaron and Mason squeezed in next to Patris and her boys. Further down, Mrs. Langley held court with a group of younger women, telling them about Maple Grove, back when this park was just a patch of grass and a rusty slide. As we ate, I looked up and down the line of tables, the longest table, they were calling it. It wasn't perfect. Someone dropped a serving spoon. A gust of wind knocked over a stack of napkins. A toddler spilled her juice, but it was ours. Later that night, as I walked back to my car under a sky just beginning to show stars, I thought about the word miracle. I've never been one for flashy miracles, the kind with bright lights and big gestures. But this felt like a miracle on a human scale. Hundreds of people in a small Ohio town choosing to show up for strangers because one woman passed a pie across the street, and another woman texted her friend, and someone else said, "Let's do it again." That's how karma looks to me now, not as some cosmic scoreboard, but as a chain reaction of small, decent choices, echoing farther than we can see. If you're listening to this, especially if you're in that 45-65 stretch of life where the house is quieter than it used to be, and your calendar has more doctor's appointments than dinner parties, I want to talk to you for a minute. You might feel like your world has shrunk. Maybe your kids are grown, or your marriage ended, or your closest friends moved away. Maybe you're working odd shifts or living on a tight budget, and the thought of hosting anything feels laughable. Maybe you're tired down to your bones. I get it. I've been there, standing in my kitchen with too much food and too many thoughts, wondering if this was it. If my life had narrowed down to leftovers and reruns, and polite small talk on Sunday mornings. Here's what I want you to hear. You are not stuck with the script you've been handed. You're allowed to scribble in the margins. You're allowed to knock on a door. You're allowed to be the one who says, "Hey, I made too much. Want to help me eat it?" You don't need a big house or fancy recipes or a mayor's blessing. You need a table, whatever size it is, a pot of something simple, and enough courage to risk someone saying no. And if they do, you knock on the next door. Maybe your version won't turn into a town-wide event. Maybe it'll just be you and one neighbor sharing spaghetti in mismatched bowls once a month. That counts. That matters. That's a miracle too. Because every time you choose connection over isolation, you're doing something quietly radical in a world that keeps telling us to manage on our own. Every plate you share, every extra chair you pull up, is a way of saying, we're still here. We still belong to each other. So the next time you're staring at a pan of lasagna that's way too big for one person, or wrapping up half a pie you know you shouldn't eat alone, I hope you'll think of my street in Maple Grove. Think of Mrs. Langley's porch light, of Mr. Donnelly's brown sweatshirt, of Aaron's tired smile when someone else stirred the chili for a change. Then I hope you'll pick up that plate, walk across the hall or across the yard, and ring the bell. You never know. That leftover slice might be the first link in a chain that stretches farther than your whole town. And even if it only stretches as far as the house next door, trust me, that's more than enough to change a life, including your own.